So then you can find our Choose Your Own Price program. Now, it's a choose your own price program because even though it is a full product and even though it's technically in beta mode because it's new, we need to get feedback and see, how people feel about it. But Cloud Jam is here to help you learn how things actually work. Like you can talk about computers and being technical, and people say all kinds of things in theory. And so I work in research spaces. I specialize in GRC. My time working with GRC started years ago, like 2008. But I also have worked in cybersecurity, and as a cybersecurity professional, GRC was always the foundation that I always used. So before setting up even security and things like that for a company, I'd set up something like HIPAA, so that you can protect healthcare. So, I'm working with healthcare providers, and also I work with a lot of manufacturers. So, I got used to working with critical infrastructure. And then, a lot of the things that I work with are offline environments that would include things, like power grids, military things. And so I have, a lot of history with that. So, one thing when we think about GRC and you think about like, I don't know if we think about like missile silos when we think about GRC, but in critical infrastructure, GRC is not just a good idea, but mandatory. So I tend to work in spaces where, heavy regulation isn't just a nice idea. You have to have it. And so, I don't think people necessarily think compliance and GRC when they think about like space launch sites and things like that and satellites. But, when you're thinking about things that get more and more technical and we have all this stuff going on, ultimately, GRC matters. So what we've done is we started working on basically an ethical system for how AI works. And our Gauntlet is actually a competency program, which we actually have a whole section, which I'll just start with going over to, one of the sections this talks about is we have there's a lot of resources in here. So if you were to go and take a look at this, there's a number of just different resources for just learning basic cloud concepts. But there's an actual technical challenge in here. So these are just sort of like the starter resources, gives you an idea of how to set up different business roles. We even have an entire guide on how you can basically build a business model from home that uses basically the idea of using computers with the same model that Airbnb has, basically. So just like you can use Airbnb and host people in your guest house, you can actually have servers instead of spare servers instead of spare rooms. And just like you would host, someone in an Airbnb spot, if you have all of your little servers organized well and all the compliance and access management and all that's in place, then you can make it to where servers in your own home or wherever you want to host those servers lets you host different people. They'll just be end user type guests for software and things like that instead of someone being in a room. But the model works generally the same way. So we actually made what that adaptation looks like. And we're about to show a lot more about that because where it says get BIOS functions, this is something we've never really shown before because we've been building this for years. And even though our technology has been out, a lot of the things like get BIOS stuff, has been not in our open source offering. So that usually only enterprises have been able to benefit from some of these technologies that we've built. So one of the things that I wanted to also focus on is, in this section here, one of the things that we talk about where it says, what to expect. Let me just go down to this little set of bullets here. What does this Gauntlet test? Because you're going to be setting up basically a little data center. This teaches this helps you understand critical thinking for technical skills. So one thing about us is we don't really believe in vendor thinking or vendor training. as we highlight here, it says, we don't really believe in vendor locked training. What I mean by that is, bear with me, since I do data science work and I work with all types of systems, if your skill set is locked into AWS, then it might be really hard to go work with something like Azure or an on-prem server. If your skill set is vendor locked into Azure, it might be really hard to go use some other thing, maybe like DigitalOcean. But if you develop an agnostic skill set, that means that you're going to be capable of doing things where critical thinking skills and what's called first principles thinking, your ability to basically, you could think of first principles thinking as the skill to think for yourself. Is kind of how that works. So, if you have the ability to do these things in this challenge, then I've been helping people get jobs for years. And then also now, we also are on the hiring side of certain things, and we help some organizations do recruiting and things like that. And one thing that we've learned from, helping someone prepare to get a job and land it, and then someone who has been hired at a job and then be able to succeed and flourish in that job, vendor lock skill sets make it really hard to train people. And so like I have to make sure that people can do the GRC work, for example, that I need them to be able to do. And oftentimes, you'll say, hey, I need this task done. And they'll say, oh, but I only know AWS, and that's that, I don't know this other thing. And then I'm like, it's the same thing. Actually, it really is.
They're all just different flavors of the same thing.
That's right. And if you learn from certain things where they're like, oh, if you learn AWS, then it's the only way, and there's no other way to do things. I don't know. It's complicated. But the minute people are like, oh, well, I can do AWS, but I can't do Azure, danger. If someone says, oh, I can do AWS, but I can't set up a server at home, danger. If someone says, oh, I can use Linux, but I can't use Windows, or oh, I can use Windows, but I can't use Linux, danger. All of that's dangerous territory. If your skills are not interchangeable, and it doesn't mean you have to learn more, but what it means is that across all operating systems, across all things on computers, believe it or not, under the hood, there's this thing called binary. Laura, what is binary? And why does binary matter? And why does it matter that all things are binary?
Oh, you're going to quiz me.
Yeah.
Binary is like zeros and ones, right? It's like the base of like all code. All code is based on binary.
All of it.
All of it. So if you learn binary, then basically you can code anything, right? Essentially.
Yeah. Exactly. So we focus on what's considered a binary foundation, meaning that a PDF file is a PDF file. A .txt file is a .txt file. A .jpg file is a .jpg file. And if you're using Linux, Windows, Mac OS, you don't have to learn how to open a .txt file differently. You double click on it on a desktop. And in some cases, if there's if you're using, terminals or shells or CLIs or whatever, that could be a little more complex. But these days, if you don't know terminal commands, you can ask an AI to help you with terminal commands. So you can trade the difference with AI. So, anyways, the idea here is this is actually an OSI model based challenge and experience, which sounds very strange. But once you go through it, you'll see that it's actually not that strange. By going through this whole challenge, you are able to prove to me and anyone who I talk to who's like, oh, NATO, would you hire this person? Well, if you can go through this gauntlet, my answer is unequivocally, yeah, absolutely. They could actually do all of these different things. They have skills at the physical layer, the data link layer, the network layer, transport layer, session layer. Wow, oh my goodness. And if you're in GRC, believe it or not, GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, it might not sound like you need to understand anything about any of these things. And you don't need to understand them deeply, but you do need to understand at a very high level. You need to understand enough to be able to audit these things. These days, if you can't audit something at every layer, you could get a job doing certain things, but at some point as an auditor, you're going to have to go and work with different types of things. If you work with, because I help companies go through things like HIPAA audits. I help people with things like SOC 2 readiness. We're going to be helping people with a lot of SOC 2 readiness soon here, because even now that we are making these new releases ourselves, we ourselves are also going through SOC 2 readiness things, Cloud Underground. And I, from my background of helping people get through SOC 2, I'm going to go ahead and have a service under Cloud Underground where I'll help other people try to get their SOC 2 readiness as well. So, if you're trying to understand how do you get these compliance readiness items, there are some technical things that can be very confusing and hard to understand. And so we've built a foundation to help you understand things with the RPG of life cycle management. Now, I'll let you check out this stuff by going over to Cloud Jam yourself. And what I'll do at this time is I will show you what happens when you're going and looking at this environment and you're using this. Basically, we used to call it a copy-paste data center. But what actually happened is that what used to be the copy-paste data center is no longer quite our product. Our product is a kernel that lives underneath that layer. And so now what we used to call the copy-paste data center is actually called a sovereign zone. And thanks to hardware changing, so I'm going to tell you all a secret about AI. So if you're auditing AI, if you're working with AI, if you're coding with it, something that many of you might not know, and I'm actually going to bounce back to this, which is why we teach this. This is why this is an OSI model experience, is that even AI has to live across these layers. And so what we actually start with is the physical layer. And so most AI programs, you're going to learn things about AI, they teach you only things up here, only things up at the application layer. You're going to learn how to type to an LLM, and you're going to learn how to hit the enter button. You're going to type random words and you're going to hit enter. Yeah, AI. No, that is not learning AI. That is not it. So we're taking a different approach because something that many of you don't necessarily know is that AI is such a big change in the market that hardware itself is actually changing. If you go and you buy something like a 5080 graphics card, or you go and get even the little computer I'm using now has neural cores, and even the Apple computers have these neural core, these different types of cores. Mm-hmm. Well, that means that AI at the very hardware level itself, if you don't know how it works at the hardware level, you can't actually get the most out of AI. And so we get all these people trying to get the most out of AI up at this layer up here, up at the application layer. And so then they're going and trying to do all this stuff and bolting things up at this application layer. So we're teaching you how to work natively with things and how to audit at a native layer, meaning that we're going to do this bottom up instead of this top down approach. Cloud Jam actually requires you to go and get hardware to build this on. No, that's right. That's right. And you can host it. That's right.
You got to get the hardware to make it all work.
And it can be AWS because, believe it or not, Laura, does AWS have hardware?
It does. It might not be in your house, but it's somewhere.
That's right. So we're going to have you choose your hardware. I don't care if it's AWS. It can be AWS. I'm going to say it right now. AWS is hardware. All of you should know, especially if you're auditing, that AWS is hardware. Guess what? Azure is hardware. And shockingly, is DigitalOcean hardware?
It is.
What about Google Cloud Platform?
Oh, it's hardware.
No. Wow. Under all of these, we have hardware. And so you're going to have to learn how to take hardware of your choice and get this to appear in your browser. Not my browser, your browser. Now, there's a way to make it to where you can make it to where your hardware can talk to my browser. That's something that you can learn from doing Cloud Jam. It teaches that too. So one thing that we have here is, let's see, we actually made, wow, there's all kinds of windows I have open. So we made this little environment that is really easy to rebuild and really easy to do quality assurance with and testing. And then once again, I'm going to say that if you build things from the hardware layer, then you can make whatever you build work with Linux, as you can see here, or Windows, or Mac OS, or when you develop from the hardware layer, you have far more options as to what your development is compatible with. So that's why we focus on starting from the hardware layer, because even though this shows that you're working in Linux, this will actually work in other different types of operating systems. So this right here talks to our actual product, which our actual product is a kernel. It does a number of things, and because it's a kernel, not only can you talk to AI, so I'm going to say something like, you can see that I've been talking to it. Now, this isn't just any AI. This is actually an MCP server. If you know what an MCP server is, great. If you don't, look it up or check out Cloud Jam for yourself. And what this does is, this is called the underground doppelganger. You can see its name here, doppelganger. So the underground doppelganger, not only is it able to come in here and answer your questions to help you understand, like if you want to know if vibe coding is a good or a bad idea, then you can ask it questions. It'll help you code. You can ask it to write you guides. It'll write you guides. But the thing about it is, it's really designed to help you benchmark your system, because it's trained in chaos. This is called a chaos surgical agent. It has different modes. So it has a mode that's more generative and healing, but this is the chaos agent. So the doppelganger is here to help you create chaos. It can do red team attacks. It can create bugs. It can even go and try to recreate circumstances that normally your customers might run into in the real world. So it will simulate all kinds of problems that you run into, and that's what this is here for. Is this the one that's here to help you, make things glorious and work? No, actually, you should be making something glorious that hopefully should work, and then you bring it into this environment, and then you test to see if it will survive the QA test. So Cloud Jam is a lot more. I could show a number of things, but I'm going to actually show how this environment's built. So it's all in here. So let's see, if we were to go, there's a section that says meet the doppelganger, and this is going to have stuff which we'll show later. But the neat thing is, you can come here yourself. You can come in here and you can look at the doppelganger's guide. Oh my goodness, code. You can learn all the different types of, wow, you can type all these things yourself, and then you can go and try them out with the doppelganger. So if you were to say, can you help me code? It will tell you something, and it will think. As it thinks, I'll talk a little bit more about what our actual product is, because even though this little virtual desktop is a layer that uses our product is actually a kernel, and it actually talks to hardware directly. And so as a result, our kernel can run virtual machines. And so it's also a full-on hypervisor. Now, one thing that's a little confusing is that it can look like this hypervisor in here is nested. This is actually a unique thing about our kernel, and it actually has to do also with graphics cards. But let me, let's see, let's go to Virtual Machine Manager. So our kernel, it's a backend that lets any environment have the benefits that cloud gives you, but then it makes those benefits portable. That includes the ability to run virtual machines, containers, orchestrate them together, develop these things. And at a very high level, we can see that it's connecting to the kernel. Oh, what's going on? The AI uses the hardware, and kernel's hardware. That's what a kernel is. A kernel is a hard software translation technology. Think of it that way. I think is probably going to take much longer. What I'll do is I'll also get something valuable to understand about how this works. Once it does load, because it has to set up, there's a special thing called SRE, which anyways, you can play around with some of this. I'll let this finish building. And while it's thinking, because this is a lot going on in this little environment, let me go over to really come back to that. So this environment right here, this is actually how you get the installer package. Now, if you take the Cloud Jam Challenge, you'll see that the other environment, you type a command, and it'll go and build the automatic or the environment for you. You type a dev in this little special shell, and it'll build this environment. Now, this one you type sec in Cloud Jam, and it tells you exactly where to type this sec command, and it builds this right here. And this is actually more than a desktop. This is where you have a control panel. Now, this is a little different from what we've had in the past. Those who've used the Underground Nexus in the past will find that this launches a little website. But this also probably looks a little different because you've used the old versions of the Underground Nexus. You probably don't have this Git BIOS control panel button on the desktop, and you most certainly probably also don't have this menu. And then one of the reasons why this is taking a little bit of time is because I have all these things going on in my kernel where it's trying to do some stuff on that other system right here. So it'll sit there and it'll go a little slower if there's a lot going on your hardware. This goes back to the hardware thing.
Yeah.
All of this has to do with our. Anyway, it'll load. Let me see how far along that thinking is going. Probably have too many things going on because we're also recording video and there's a quality stream.
No, it's fine.
Oh.
It's not.
It's working?
Yeah, it's working.
It's hitting the button, right?
Oh, no, it's bad. Let us know in the chat.
One thing I did to make it other things. So if that
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, anyways, that would mean that I'll talk about what's happening under the hood here. When you're using different types of AI models, they all work differently. So, one that here is designed to the uses, well,